Blood Money, episode 83 with Nikki Florio. The planet is on the verge of death, and it has nothing to do with global warming. I remember from the last episode, Nikki revealed a whole bunch of things to me, right? One of it was the shape of weird clouds, right? How you could tell that there's something very wrong with the clouds because of geoengineering, the way the sky looks. And, I'm very sad to report that, it's become abundantly clear that we are being poisoned almost on a daily level. I've kept my eyes, up in the sky once in a while, seeing what's going on. I constantly see chemtrails. I constantly see skies. One of the things that Nikki had pointed out in the episode we did on Blood Money was that the sky is not supposed to be gray, especially when you have, a bright blue sky, which is what we're used to seeing definitely growing up. And now you look at the sky, and because of all this crap that they're putting up there, the sky does not look blue. It looks gray. It looks these odd shades. Then you see these clouds that are not normal looking clouds, that do not match anything made by nature. And you wonder why this is happening. Now, if you don't know why this is happening, I highly recommend you watch the original episode that Nikki and I did a couple of months back, because you will learn a whole lot. And so this is a follow-up episode where we're going to talk a lot about the tangible issues. And Nikki, as always, is going to reveal some amazing information to us, probably some scary information, but information that you need to know, because frankly, the future of the planet, the future of our children relies upon this. So Nikki, how are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. You're going to deliver us some terrible news. So why don't we just, dive right into it? If you want to do a quick little introduction for the viewer that doesn't already know you, and then, the mic is yours.
Oh, okay. So for my background, my name's Nikki Florio, and I have a nonprofit called Be Heroic. Mm-hmm. And Be Heroic is a climate and pollinator project. We're an adult-focused project. And when I was a kid, grew up in Central California in the farmlands, and then moved up to Tahoe when I was in my early 20s, and really loved the environment. And I dropped out of school as a kid, so I went back to school and really got into environmental education and got a degree in natural sciences, and then went back to school and got a degree in humanities with a focus on environmental psychology. And ran a project out there called TREE, which is Tahoe Regional Environmental Education, and designed that program to be a tri-branch integrated sustainability program. Now, the word sustainability has become a really bad word lately, because it's a huge greenwash word, and greenwashing is just a purposeful intent to deceive a consumer regarding the sustainability or the environmental and human friendliness of a product, service, or practice. So through that program, I did it for 10 years. We did projects to help make homes and families more educated on beneficial consumerism, and as well to learn about the natural environment and the value of the natural environment, both mentally and physically and economically, and then how to protect it through that. So we're going to cover a little bit of that later. But in around 2009, I started noticing really heavy anomalies in systems, and I worked outside hundreds of days a year. And we would have storms without storm fronts, and odd issues with wildlife and plants in the environment after these storms. And we'd also have, storms without storm fronts and lightning during snowstorms. And I would Google all of this stuff, and it would come up as geoengineering. And even though I'd had meteorology and learned about weather modification, had never heard of geoengineering. So it really made me pay attention. So after I stopped the Tahoe Regional Environmental Education, the TREE program, I did some research and ended up going out to Colorado, where we started Be Heroic. So we use pollinators as kind of a way to introduce that type of technology, as well as some of the other negative technologies that we're dealing with, and how to protect ourselves from them.
Yeah, yeah. And essentially, you realize that they're really messing around with our weather. They're doing a lot of geoengineering.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So today's talk, I think we're going to be doing more kind of Earth Day stuff that shows the kind of more the value of the planet. What's happening right now is today is Earth Day, right when the pandemic hit in.
Yeah. By the way, quick little note: we're filming this on Earth Day, but we're gonna air it actually next week because Earth Day is a Saturday. Everybody's hanging out, enjoying their weekend, and we want to make sure we get some viewers. So this is coming to you probably sometime next week after April 24th.
Yeah. So Earth Day was founded 53 years ago, and when we had April of 2020 was the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. But it's been hijacked, and today there are Earth Day projects in every city in the country and around the world. And in the U.S., most of our larger Earth Day events are just massive greenwash campaigns.
What greenwash? Could you define greenwash?
Oh yeah, greenwash is the intent to deceive consumers about the environmental friendliness of different products and services and practices and corporations.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of like whitewashing in politics, where you show a good face, but you don't, you give part of the truth, but not the whole truth.
Oh, okay. Should we dive into, you have an amazing group of slides here that are going to tell essentially the story of, your most recent research. Should we just dive into it here? Or?
Yeah, that's fine.
Awesome. So apologies, I'm looking for slide 1. Oh, here we go. Oh, blood money with Vem Miller. Hey.
the Earth Day cake. So, you would think after 50 plus years, Earth would have gotten more and more healthy with all of the technologies that we have, and all of the people that are aware of impacts of pollution. And yet everything has been hijacked, and people think that pouring money and advancing technology is going to make Earth better, but it's simply not,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Earth is a pretty extraordinary planet. It's generally the only living one that we know about right now, even though, with the billions of planets in our universe, there's probably many more living planets. But we're physically connected to Earth. We live at the Schumann resonance, which is why when humans, go out into space, and they go out on like the ISS, the International Space Station, when they come back, their health is impacted because we live at the frequency of Earth, which is, the healthy resonance of Earth is 7.83 hertz.
Mm-hmm.
So it's another reason that the telecom industry, 4G, 5G is so impactful. But right now on Earth, we have polluted every square inch of the planet. Our pollution from plastics and pollution from tailpipes and emissions, which are not, by the way, the sole reason for what we call climate change today. That's mostly geoengineering. But pollutions from factories, and then polluting our oceans with plastic is one thing. We also have oil spills and chemical spills and corrupt governments, and the biggest polluter in the U.S. and probably the world, the U.S. military.
Wow.
With everything we've done to the planet, from thousands and thousands of nuclear explosions in our over our continent and in the ocean with naval testing and the expulsion of radiation from meltdowns in Fukushima. We're taking out our planet, and so we need to work as efficiently as possible right now. And choosing a specific area to actually help with, whether it's stopping 5G or informing people on how to really become more conscious consumers, things like that. That's very helpful. And learning about different technologies and different energies and different ways to save energy, conserve energy. Those things are all very important. Yeah.
While we've been talking here, I've been trying to find the Blood Money episode we did, because I think it's very important for the viewer to know about it. One of the things that definitely I learned from that episode is what you just mentioned about the fact that, all this global warming is primarily due to the geoengineering, meaning, we keep getting hit over the head. You're the polluters, you're the bad guys, humans are bad, blah, blah, blah. But when you actually research this stuff and see what's really going on, you realize that this is their work that we're being blamed for. It's not the exhaust that's coming out of your car that's doing most of this work in terms of polluting the planet and appearing as though it's due to global warming. So for the viewers, definitely, try to check out that episode. You will learn a lot, and a lot of what we're saying here will make a lot more sense once you've seen that episode.
Yeah. And I mean, when you look at, this is just an image from the internet, and it's a composite image. I think this one was one of the NASA composite images. But what you see here are blue ocean, a big area of blue in the ocean, and you see, swirling systems. Today, if you look at, for example, NASA Worldview website, Earth looks more like a cataract than it does a big blue marble.
Wow. Well, by the way, that was episode 62. I just tracked that down. Blood Money episode 62 with Nikki Florio.
Yeah. So on that one, we cover all of the different issues surrounding geoengineering, and geoengineering by definition is deliberate large-scale intervention in Earth's natural systems to counteract climate change. But weather modification has been going on for almost 80 years now. And geoengineering, is just a larger scale weather modification.
Wow.
So, yeah. When we discuss protecting the planet, it's not just, land and rock and water. It's actually, when we're thinking of that, protecting the planet, what we're discussing, or what we should be discussing, is life on Earth and within Earth. We live in a three-dimensional world, but there's animals that live in kind of a four-dimensional world, like in the oceans and things like that, which is where most of our life started. So when we say, we want to save the Earth, we really need to be more thoughtful of what that is, and understand the elements of what that is, and what that generally is all the animals and insects and everything. And I think we have another slide that kind of shows the biome, or the life kind of in an overview. So what we call the base of the food chain, humans, we consider ourselves the top of the food chain. When we're actually the bottom of the food chain, we depend on so many things, even our own physiology. I think we only make up around 2% of our own DNA in our bodies, because we have trillions of viruses and billions of bacteria just in our bodies. And even in our body, we have different biomes, from our gut and our brain microbiome to the biome of life on our skin, in our hair, in our mouth. We are loaded with microbes, and so is the rest of the planet. In the oceans, we have zooplankton and phytoplankton, and even in forests and grasslands and ranges, plants themselves have microbial communities everywhere from the soil to the bark of plants and the leaves of plants and the full structure. And those are the most affected by these changes in environment and pollution. So when you go from those to different lichens and fungi, which is kind of a cross between a plant and an animal, to all of the insects and cephalopods and mammals and birds and reptiles and fish, we are loaded with an extraordinary amount of life on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But we'll go out every day and drive on the road and see, hundreds or thousands of cars. And sometimes we don't even see a handful of birds or even butterflies or bees or any other animals today.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's a really tough thing. And in the ocean, in the US anyway, our coastlines are now lined with 5G. Everything is becoming a smart city, and those millimeter waves really damage aquatic life because of the millimeter waves going through water. When you microwave water, you're gonna have terrible impacts on all of those things. And 5G is also wreaking havoc on insects because the millimeter waves pass through most insects' bodies, so it causes I think it's called dialectic heating. They heat from the inside out because their exoskeleton holds that heat in. So
Wow.
honeybees and bumblebees and beetles and everything is getting cooked, with the exception of very dangerous insects. For example, the mosquito, the Oxitec.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with Oxitec?
No, I'm not.
Oxitec is a company that makes a genetically engineered mosquito.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Gates is one of the funders of Oxitec. The company's out of the UK, but they've released millions and millions of mosquitoes, starting almost a decade ago in Florida, and then over the past few years in California. And I think they were supposed to start with a few, about a dozen counties, but ended up doing dozens of counties in the US or in California. Mm-hmm. And so these tiny mosquitoes, they're a genetically engineered mosquito, and they're male mosquitoes. So they're supposed to mate with the female mosquitoes, mm-hmm. and sterilize them. But what what scientists have found is that they're not sterilizing the female mosquitoes, so they're reproducing. So now you have a genetically engineered animal that injects its genetically engineered saliva into your skin when it bites you.
Wow.
And there's millions and millions that are released at a time. They use drones. They'll fly over these communities with drones and do releases of millions of mosquitoes. Mm-hmm. And the problem with them is that they use, I think it's called the Aegis aegypti. So it's an Egyptian mosquito that carries malaria and dengue fever. Mm-hmm. So you don't. It's generally contained to the tropics, but with 5G, 5G heats this insect up, not enough to kill it, but enough to allow it to spread to cooler regions. So when they release these mosquitoes, they'll release the mosquitoes during storms, rainstorms, and even snowstorms. People in myself included, people in California and Nevada and other kind of surrounding states have noticed these tiny mosquitoes, when mosquitoes shouldn't be, first of all, out anytime or anywhere near any snowstorm. But over the past couple of years, you'll see them right after snowstorms, and they're very tiny and very quick. So they're relatively hard to kill. And another thing with these mosquitoes is they're also the same mosquito, I think the same species that Bill Gates is using in a funding project for mosquito vaccination.
Mm-hmm.
So
Wow.
doing an mRNA mosquito that will inject inject the same way. So those are very dangerous. Anyway, in the Bible,
they really just want to get this mRNA into us, however they can. I mean, we've heard about they're putting it in our meats, that you could actually inject it into cows. We've also heard that one of the reasons why they're not big fans of eggs is because it's hard to get the mRNA into actual eggs because of the shell. I don't know if that's accurate, but seems like we're hearing a lot about them really wanting to get mRNA into us.
yes, and they have been using mRNA vaccines in cattle for a while. So people eating conventional beef or milk products with that mRNA vaccinated animal are going to get it. And I have spoken to some grass-fed ranches that absolutely will not use that, but you have to really, talk to your farmers or ranchers if you're getting meat that way, and make sure that they're not doing that. Yeah. And with geoengineering as well, when the material from geoengineering gets into the soil, livestock are eating the toxins. The nanomaterial goes up through the plant, for example, aluminum. Mm-hmm. So the animals eat that. So if they're not getting a supplement like biochar, we work with a company called Biochar now that makes pellets for livestock, mm-hmm. and it's certified organic as well. It's OMRI certified, so it can be used on rangelands or straight as pellet additives for diets, and it cleans out the metals and toxins from their system. So it's really good. Mm-hmm. But in wildlands, there are grants for farmers and ranchers and conservation groups to get this char so that they can put it on the land, and it's 100% coverage, so it's very good. And you can also put it in socks and drop it in ponds and waterways, and it takes out those toxins, but it doesn't bind mRNA. That's not one of the things that it binds. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. I'm going to put up the next slide here.
Okay. So when it comes to Earth, the animals are very important, but the plants, a lot of the microbial plants and fungi and trees and flowering plants, they were here long before a lot of life was, especially trees and grasses. They're the more ancient plants, and there are some flowering plants. So before there were flowers, we had our Earth went through several changes. The continents changed place on the planet, and we went through several different eras. And so as the plants grew and adapted, the first plants had to pollinate themselves. And the first plants we had were growing in the water. So they used currents and waves to pollinate themselves. And then with trees and grasses, they use wind for pollination. Mm-hmm. And so one of the problems with geoengineering is it disrupts natural wind and wind cycles. So normally when it's really hot out, you should have a lot of thermal convection, and you guys down in the desert, you probably remember it used to have really windy days. Mm-hmm. And those older grasses in the deserts and some of the plants, and then of course, in the forest, those plants would get pollinated by winds through big winds, but also through the lighter winds, they would pollinate themselves. But what's happening is we're experiencing what's called wind stilling, mm-hmm. where the air is just dead and stopped. And you probably noticed this down there as well. When there's a lot of aerosol, they'll start in the morning and start spraying. They'll cap the convective system so cumulus clouds don't form, but it really stills the air. You have really still, stale, hot days instead mm-hmm. of having the wind that you're used to. But about 100 million years ago, more plants started to flower and bloom all over the continents and the plains and the mountains and the deserts. And so those needed those needed assistance in pollinating because they weren't specifically being pollinated by wind or water. So that's why we have pollinators. And so the pollinators, I think we have them on the next slide, or some of them on the next slide, is
sorry, one sec here. This one?
Yeah. So we call the scope of pollinators the Great Pollination, because this is it's an amazing group of insects and animals all over the world that pollinate different plants.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't realize that, when we're called bee heroic because so many people knew there was a problem with bees, and we've known this for decades, because we really started having our first big bee losses when agrochemical really got a good foothold in politics under Daddy Bush,
Mm-hmm.
and then with Hillary Clinton, who was one of the attorneys, I think, for the Rose law firm, Monsanto's biggest law firm. She really helped it, really get agrochemical in the door and GMO and all that stuff, and heavier amounts of pesticides and fungicides and herbicides and stuff like that. So people knew that there was a problem with honeybees, but what they didn't realize is that it's the scope of pollinators that are being impacted. But bees, honeybees, there's around 20,000 species of bees on the planet, and only about 6 of them are honeybees.
Mm-hmm.
The bulk of them are solitary, and we didn't even have honeybees in the U.S. until the colonists came over and brought them. And states like California, for example, have around 1,600 species of bees, and across the U.S. there's around 4,000 species of bees, but there's 300,000 species of beetles, and then also other insects, ants and butterflies and moths and all these other insect species. But there's also dozens and dozens of bird species that pollinate, and huge amounts of bat species. Bats are the most numerous mammal species on Earth, and people think of them, a lot of them are insectivores, and some of them eat fruit, and there's a couple that are vampire bats. But the bats that also pollinate are going in there. When pollinators go to flowers, they're generally after the nectar. Mm-hmm. So flowers will when some insects like bees go to flowers, insects like bees are positively charged and the flowers are negatively charged, so they feel the bee coming and they'll express more nectar to get the bee to come in and take the nectar and put it in its honey stomach, but it'll also get coated with the pollen. So it takes the pollen from flower to flower, and that's the same way these other animals do. And what's happening right now is 5G is causing mold proliferation in plants, and 5G also causes plants to become toxic. Mm-hmm. So if people aren't protecting their plants or their crops from 5G, it doesn't change the flavor of the food. It just makes the food toxic. So that creates a problem as well. Mm-hmm. And there are companies, a company called Noxtac that has a product for people that have greenhouses that kind of want to protect their food, called a Spiro disc, and they can go through Be Heroic to find that product, or they can go straight to the Spiro Solutions. So they can put it in their homes. We're working with the company to make a really large disc as well for farms and ranches to protect other animals. But insects like pollinators are very small in general, hummingbirds and mm-hmm. all these other animals. So 5G causes huge problems, kills a lot of the insects outright because of their small size. These penetrate the top 2 millimeters of the body. So for insects, it superheats them right away. And birds have magnetoreceptors behind their eyes, so it causes eye and brain damage. And then their wings, like on human skin, the top 2 millimeters of our skin is impacted by 5G. So it penetrates our skin, and our hairs, the hair cells, act like what's called helial array antennas. So it's really bad for humans and makes us more susceptible to bacteria. But for things like honeybees, as well as other insects, it destroys their exoskeleton. They have these little plates called chitin, and those get, it decreases their ability to fight viruses and makes them get loaded with bacteria as well. So, yeah.
Well, should I trigger the next one?
Oh, sure. So when people think of pollinators, they're usually, I've been talking to people for 20 plus years about environments and pollinators, and the first thing people say, and you've probably heard this, Vem, when you talk about bees, the first thing they say is what?
About bees, like they don't want to get stung by bees, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. People don't want to get stung, so a lot of people are scared of bees. So they either have that's like one view, or they'll have the other view. They'll say, I love bees, I love honey, and bees need honey a lot more than we do. It's best to keep that honey in the hive. But people have gardens and flowers, and they really today need to focus more on planting for pollinators, which means planting more native flowers or flowers or plants that will flower a lot and often, in addition to everything else you have in the garden. And one of the best ways to do that is to plant herbs like sages and mints and bee balm and things like that create a lot of flowers. So you can still have your garden and also plant other plants. Now, different insects and pollinators will go towards different colors. If you want to have hummingbirds and butterflies and all kinds of different bees, bumblebees and things like that, you want to plant reds and purples and blue flowers and things like that. And then a lot of the lower flowers like alyssum and some of the low growing creeping plants like sages and mints and things like that, and creeping thyme, those lower flowers will be a little bit lighter in color, light purples or pinks or whites or yellow. And that will also attract more of the beneficial ant pollinators and beetles and moths and things like that in the evening. And there will be crossovers of moths and butterflies and things like that. But all of these animals assist each other. You can't really save the bee. You can't save the bumblebee without saving all of these other things. But so people love, pollinators a lot more now than they used to. And people need to be thoughtful of leaving the spring flowers in their yard. The most beneficial flowers, the most beneficial first flowers in every single garden, every single yard is the dandelion. And we've been taught by agrochemical companies, i.e. Monsanto, which is Pfizer, by the way, that the dandelion is an enemy and that it's a weed and we need to kill it. So people spray it with Roundup and then they just spray it and they leave it there and then they walk away. But what they don't realize is when you leave that flower with Roundup on it, you're still going to get the bees and the butterflies and the ants and even some birds will come and pollinate it. So they'll come and get the poison and bring that poison to other plants. And then when if those flowers go to seed, if it becomes that little puffball, birds will eat that seed and they'll also feed that seed to their babies, that toxic seed. So we're seeing, huge drops in bird population and insect populations around schools and city parks that use that a lot, and also a lot of people's yards at home. But dandelions are one of the most nutrient-dense foods on earth. There are numerous studies on the values of every part of the dandelion, from the head of the dandelion to the root, which is loaded with calcium, to the leaves. You can make dandelion tea and jam, and you can even make dandelion wine. But its cancer-fighting properties are extraordinary, which is probably one of the reasons they wanted everyone to destroy it. So,
Nikki, do you mind? I'm just going to run out for one quick second. I got to open my door. I'll be back in just 1 minute, okay?
Yes, yeah.
You're holding that thought 1 second, okay?
Yeah.
Sorry, Nikki.
No, don't apologize.
So dandelions, you were saying, so dandelions sound like, dandelion tea, a lot of nutritional benefits, and obviously they don't like that. They don't like that it's really helpful in fighting cancer.
No, they don't like it at all. Yeah. It's almost all nutrient-dense foods or plants they make an enemy of. That's what they did with hemp.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. So,
and now they're trying to take meat out of our diets, which what we've learned in some of our podcasts is an all meat diet is actually not a bad thing.
Yes, and meat is it's even being used as a climate problem. But but of course that's driven by Bill Gates, who's a huge, not just him, other billionaires, investors in artificial meats and things like that. So that's pretty bad. So when we're growing our little gardens and people are doing what they can for bees, but bees and other pollinators. But one of the things that's missing from a lot of gardens are what are called bee baths.
Mm-hmm.
And are you familiar with those?
No, what is a bee bath?
Oh, okay. So with geoengineering, geoengineering dries the atmosphere out. So it's one of the reasons that we don't have dew in the morning anymore in most areas. And it's one of the reasons, that fog is gone from the Central Valley or from valley regions and even river valleys, and along coastlines. There's a lot less fog than there was even 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so this nanomaterial from the aerosols in geoengineering, it breaks up the existing moisture. So animals and insects that travel on the ground are not getting that morning dew, or insects like bees and beetles that fly around that used to get that morning dew that was sitting on plants and grasses and trees. They would use those little drops of dew as their kind of daily water source. And even in deserts, for snakes and tortoises and insects in the desert. But because it's gone, it's more important now that we supplement that water. So bees don't like running water. A bee generally won't go, or bees and butterflies generally won't go to rivers and things like that to get water, because they get swept away. So you can make a shallow bee bath, and you can search these on the internet. You can make them very elaborate or very simply. And it's a shallow, for example, a glass pan of water that you throw some little pebbles in and rocks and twigs, and then fill it with water so that the insects can land on the rocks or the twigs. Mm-hmm. And go and get the water. And I've seen some of these in houses and ranches and resorts where people have made them really into beautiful rock displays and things like that. But they can be just very simple. And if you add, for example, zeolite, a mineral like zeolite, to the water. Zeolite's a volcanic mineral, and you can order it online. Just order a food grade. If you throw that in the water, the animals, it zeolite absorbs the aluminum and the toxins and the other elements, so it's more beneficial for the insects and animals that are drinking it. And the same thing with bird baths, and you'll also get birds coming to bee baths. Mm-hmm. The same way. They're called the bee bath, but it's more for insects. And you'll probably also see wasps and other animals there. Wasps are not enemies for people out there who are terrified of them. They're pretty amazing insects as well. They're great pollinators. The bee species actually descended from the wasp, because the wasp were around prior to flowering plants, and then as there were more and more flowering plants, bees kind of just descended from them. So they do both. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no. I was just saying,
But with all the flies and gnats that we have now, you definitely want to keep wasps around, because they'll eat flies and spiders and ticks, and keep all of those animals down.
Okay.
So gardens are pretty important for us and for pollinators, but pollinators, the big value of these amazing animals is more in ecosystems. So I think we have the following, just a basic ecosystem slide. So in these systems, we don't realize when we're walking through a desert, or we're walking on the side of a hill, or we go through rangelands and grasslands and forests, that when we see those areas, we don't see wildflowers all year, but we'll see them there, and they're the first plants to really root in outside of the trees. And so insects have helped create these amazing ecosystems. They've supported in the development of these ecosystems. And for millions and millions of years, in between, these major geologic events that we have, they're the first ones that come back that stabilize the soil. So they're pollinating a plant that's rooting down into the soil, so it stabilizes the soil, and they also help retain moisture and stabilize slopes and things like that. And they also create, very, fragrant areas for us. We like to walk through these areas, but the trillions collectively, probably trillions of these animals are disappearing at a tremendous rate. So that's going to further have big impacts on our ecosystems, not just on land, but also in water, in areas like marshes, which is in kind of the next slide in. And we'll just take a minute on this next slide. So at the edges of areas, whether it's an estuary or where a river has been dammed and you have ponds or marshes, these areas have a tremendous amount of life, and the insects and animals are really important in these areas, because the plants need to attract the insect in order to survive, and the insects need those plants in order to survive. So it's a very symbiotic relationship. Humans would never have developed to the degree that we have, and without pollinators either. And in the next slide we have is just like a handful of different foods that we eat. So in the scope of foods that we eat, if humans would have just subsisted on meat and grains, we never would have gotten to where we are today. The most nutrient dense foods on Earth, with the most broad vitamin and mineral content, are fruits and vegetables and nuts and things like this. And these are all pollinated by different animals and insects. For example, if you're eating a pineapple, you're eating a fruit that's been pollinated by the pineapple beetle or hummingbirds or bees. And if you're having a chocolate bar, you're having hot cocoa or whatever, that insect is a tiny little gnat called a cocoa midge. It's an itty bitty little animal, And if you eat things like figs, you're actually eating a fruit that does not exist without a certain type of wasp that crawls in the fruit and dies, and then the flower comes to fruit. So you're eating kind of part of the envelopment of a dead insect within.
Are you talking about every single fig you eat has a dead insect in it?
No, I'm talking about figs.
Figs.
Yes.
So every single fig that you eat has a dead insect.
Wasp.
Okay. Every single fig, like the fig that I would buy, like even Fig Newtons have some, dead insects in there.
So yeah, but it's completely absorbed into the plant.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. No, that's interesting. I never knew that. I thought they just dry the stuff out and then they serve it to you.
Yeah. So you're not going to see like a little wasp head if you got.
Yeah.
It just goes in, and so pollinators don't all pollinate the same way. Some pollinators, the reason that honeybees are so valuable is their body and the way they pollinate is adapted for is adaptable to a lot of different types of flowers, whereas plants like tomatoes, for example, tomatoes will pollinate a lot easier if the pollen is shaken from the plant. So bumblebees, for example, use a type of vibration pollination, where they go in and they go to the plant and get the nectar, and then they vibrate their thorax, and that vibrates, that shakes the pollen loose from the plant. So I think tomatoes and peppers are very well assisted by bumblebees. So in those crops, those are just as valuable, if not more, than the honeybees. And then there's also mason bees and sweat bees and leaf cutters and all kinds of other assistant insects. And in some cases, other insects are more valuable than honeybees, but honeybees are assistant in the crops, like coffee, for example. Doesn't really need honeybees, but you can boost production, I think, about 25% if you have hives on those coffee plantations. So
okay.
So it's a pretty amazing, complex system, and even bat pollinators are wonderful. Agave plants are pollinated by bats. Most desert plants are, but we did an event. We do an event on Cinco de Mayo for restaurants that want it on tequila and bats. So we do kind of tequila mixers, and we do presentations that feature bats and bat pollination. So in the realm, we talk about how beneficial these insects and animals are to us, but the insects themselves are also helping with agriculture and livestock. So when you're do you want to pull up that next? So pollinators are not just beneficial for us in crops and agriculture. If you have grazing lands or ranch lands or wild lands, the pollinators are pollinating out there as well, and all kinds of grazing animals. They're not just eating grass; they're eating a lot of the wildflowers as well. So all of those nutrients are also going back into those animals, which is another reason that naturally fed and naturally raised animals are more nutritious for humans, for people that eat meat or eat eggs. You want the meat that you're consuming, these animals that you're consuming, to be nutrient dense and healthy as well. And in the full spectrum of insects, billions and billions of insects all over the world, though they themselves are also, we got the next slide.
Coming up. Oops, wrong one.
So millions of species and billions of individual insects also help feed massive populations of birds and bats and reptiles and amphibians, and some humans eat it as well. But spiders are another valuable part of our ecosystems because they're the great cyclers, recyclers, and cleanup insects. But unfortunately, if you look at the next little slide, older people who grew up in forests and farms and valleys, they remember in the summertime, you would drive around and your windshield and the grill of your car would be coated with insects. When I was a kid in the Central Valley, San Joaquin Valley, you didn't go more than a few days if you were driving around without cleaning your windshield off, because there were always butterflies and bees and beetles and all kinds of things, squished up on your grill because there were just gazillions of insects. And there were also birds all over the place because these were a huge food source. And yet today, not just in the Central Valley of California, but throughout the US and throughout the world, there are only a handful of places that still have healthy populations. And that's not an exaggeration.
Yeah, this is by far the scariest slide. I'm just going to turn it off real quick. I mean, this is, oops, wrong one. This is by far the scariest slide that you've shown, because I remember taking road trips back in the 90s and we'd have to clean our windshields quite often. I mean, that slide that you showed, and I'll flash it back on here, I mean, this tells me there's like serious environmental collapse coming, especially when you know how valuable each of these insects are.
Yes, and it's not coming, it's here. This is what we have.
Wow.
In the last 2 years before the pandemic, we were on a tour called the Pollen Nation Tour, and so we did a Western States tour where we went from Colorado to out through the states to California and even out to Hawaii and back. And I would go across several states and never have to clean my windshield off. And I'm talking about in the spring and the summer. And it was heartbreaking. And it's worse today. All we have are tiny little gnats and some biting flies in areas. And if there is a hatch, sometimes you'll go through an area and there will be a hatch of a specific insect like a butterfly. So you'll drive through the area and you'll have butterflies, on the grill of your car. And your car is a great collective mode for seeing the health of an area, even though you're killing the insects, unfortunately. But in the last those last 2 or 3 years driving across, and then in 2020 and 2021, when I would go through different states and go through different ecosystems, deserts or through valleys, the farm valleys or along the coastline, there were so few insects that when you stopped to get gas, there would be blackbirds or different chickadees, depending on where you were in the western states, that would come up to cars at gas stations or hop around parking lots, and they would be eating the insects off the grills of cars because that was the only food source available to them. Mm-hmm. So we're in a huge pickle. So we're going to have to stop this. And what we're seeing right now is the sixth great mass extinction event in global history.
Yeah. Wow. And it's all because of greedy human beings. It's all because of human beings with ulterior motives that are essentially planning this demise.
Yes, that's the bulk of it. The bulk of the reason. Do you want to go to the next slide on this?
Yep.
Yeah. So that is the bulk. The major reason that the extinction event is happening is because this is part of the reset. This is the only extinction event that's been caused by a single species and not a natural event.
And the insane thing about this is they keep blaming us. It's us polluting. It's us doing this and that with the plastics. I mean, that's what's just so mind-blowing, is that it has really not much to do with us. It has to do with the technology that they are putting out there, whether they tested and they know the results or it's untested, whatever it is. I mean, this is totally out of our hands. How do you stop them from basically destroying humankind?
Well, so I agree with most of that. We are still at fault. We are at fault because we're not paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're also at fault to 2 degrees. We're at fault to certain degrees because most people are either uneducated and they don't have an opportunity to learn about what they are doing to add to the extinction, or they're ignoring to what they're doing that's adding to the extinction event. And as far as the elites, manipulating people, they had the help of us because they know that people are greedy. They know that generally people are not proactive, but they're reactive, especially in the U.S. So there has always, you'll hear people say, I'm sure you've heard people say this too, Vem, or I'm not sure, you may have. You've probably heard people say, well, we've had extinctions before, and there's, what's the difference? There's animals disappearing all the time, and that's true. But the difference between the natural extinction levels and the current extinction is that we're losing 200 to 300 species of plants and animals every single day.
Wow.
Off the planet.
Wow.
So I think it was about 6 months ago. Was it 6 months ago that we did our show, or 3 months ago?
3 months ago, yeah.
Yeah. So that's about 30 plus thousand animals and plants that have disappeared since the last time we did a show together. And that's the blink of an eye in geologic time.
Wow.
And so it's a huge problem right now. There are
we basically have complete sociopaths running the world that really, when you're showing me this stuff, the sinister deeds of like the Stalins and the Hitlers of the world kind of seem, I hate to say it, it's mild compared to what you're showing me here.
Yes. It's not that those people aren't horrible and did, they did horrible acts, but the biggest problems are with us and our not just our lack of education, but ignoring what's happening and being unwilling to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So when we cover these, the major drivers behind these deaths, every single day in media, there's information on massive die-offs of animals and forests and ecosystems that are collapsing, but they're not being presented by mainstream media. Mainstream media is focusing on keeping the masses distracted. So all you're going to hear about is the pandemic and the transgender agenda and politics, the whole BS thing. And the Republicans and Democrats, they're so busy bickering about these puppets that have been put in place that not only will they not look behind the curtain, it blows me away that Democrats don't know that Biden today, that Biden's a pedophile. the fact that all this information has been out forever, and the fact that Republicans are supporting, the president that gave, trillions of dollars, $2 trillion, about $1 trillion each to big pharma to fast track the vaccines and track and trace and all of the low Earth orbiting satellites and telecommunications and 5G infrastructure, and they have no idea that he does it. And when you discuss these things with them and you say, we can provide information to you, they really don't want to hear it. And instead everybody points, they still continue to point the finger at the other political leader instead of realizing they're both horrific, and they're only put there so that you guys continue to do that bickering, so that you don't pay attention to the dying planet and the accelerating door, the acceleration of the closing of the door of time that we have left to stop this.
Wow.
So in environmental, when people talk about saving the environment, they talk about the very low hanging fruit of helping the planet. And most Earth days will discuss these things outside of today's full blown Earth Day joke, whether it's, and I'm not saying that every single business at these events are greenwash businesses, but any major event in Texas, California, Oregon, Washington, or any other state in the U.S., major Earth Day events are the biggest joke in the world. They'll have full-blown recycling going on, but they will not discuss the other ways that we can really help as consumers, especially in reducing the impacts that we have on the planet. And this is outside of taking action on the triple threat, which we'll get to in a minute. So when people hear about, when people are discussing helping the planet, everybody talks about recycling. But the original 3 R's, and I can't remember the fella, I think he was out of England or somewhere in the UK, who wrote the first 3 R's were reduce, reuse, recycle. And that is actually the order of design that is intentionally made as a consumer map. So when you think of products, so reducing the amount of products that you purchase automatically reduces your waste, and reusing products that you purchase also helps reduce your purchasing of products. And then recycling them is just another way to possibly reuse them or repurpose them. You can also do what's called upcycling, which is making a product out of another product that becomes something completely different. Like, for example, seatbelts. You take a bunch of seatbelts out of a bunch of, millions of cars, and you can weave them into big bags or luggage or whatever. That's just one example of upcycling. But the R that's left out the most of everything is research. And if you research your products and you learn about the life cycle, or doing your own assessment, your own LCA, life cycle assessment, that'll also help you become smarter about purchasing. And researching can be research. The word itself is, people think it's a big deep dive, and it can be. You can research the same topic for decades and decades and decades, or you can simply look into something a few times, and you're just looking again at it from different angles. So when people purchase a can of like a power drink or something, if you if you purchase I can't think of the names because I never drink them. What is it? An energy
like Monster or something.
Monster, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, that stuff is like pure poison, as I'm sure you know. But
yeah, so if you look at the actual ingredients and you look at the ingredients, most of them most of the ingredients you can't pronounce, but those, it's a very toxic drink. And if you want a boost of energy, that's probably not the best way to go about it. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're going to drink something like Gatorade is they talk about drinking Gatorade after you work out. You can look at the vitamin and mineral content, which isn't very much, and the actual ingredients, and it's got like a fairly short list of ingredients, but it doesn't really give you any nutritional value. The thing about Gatorade is you're drinking water that when you're done, you've sweated, so you're dehydrated. And if you want to keep your muscles from cramping, if you do a really heavy workout, you could drink water alone and have better benefits. Or if you drink a fruit juice specific to the needs, if you want, more potassium or whatever, you could drink a mixed type of juice that's going to give you way more benefit. But researching, just simply reading labels is an easy way to tell what you're putting into your body. But you can also do the same thing with other products. It doesn't just have to be things that you're eating. Now, when I used to run the TREE program, Tahoe Regional Environmental Education, and we did elementary schools, middle school, high school, and college programs. We would do supplemental programs. And one of the programs that people liked the best was a project that we did where we would take people to the grocery store and we'd walk through the grocery store and have them read the labels on everything from juices and cereals to meats, and we'd have them look at the different labeling to see, for example, in organic certification, what the certification meant, whether it was a USDA certification versus CCOF, like the California certification for organic farming, or any other certification versus what was the international organic certifications. And then when we were done with the tour, we'd have them as homework go home and just spend like a half an hour or so on the computer so that they could get a good understanding on the websites of the certifiers and to see the difference. And that way they could that way they could have their own opinion as to which ones were valid and which ones were not valid, or the validity of each. So on the in conscious consumerism, that's simply, conscious consumerism is simply being aware of your product. And so we have an outline that we call the W's of consumerism, and I think it's our next slide on here. But with the W's of consumerism, I'm just gonna, if you don't mind, is it okay if I just ask you these questions?
Sure.
Ben? Okay. Yeah. So in consumerism, who consumes?
I mean, the people, the consumers.
Who are they?
I mean, just regular folks.
Yeah. And what is it that people consume? What do people buy?
Well, I mean, food products. I mean, consume, like literally consume, mostly food. But when you think about all the other stuff, I mean, that's, in my mind, a form of consumerism. If you're buying, whether it's computers or clothing, I mean, that's all consumerism in my viewpoint.
Yes. So products that we buy.
Mm-hmm.
So in consumerism, so what we're buying are things, and these things come from resources. Mm-hmm. And what are some of the resources that we use what are some of the resources that we use in our life? Excuse me.
Food, textiles.
So the basis of products the basis of products are things, for example, in your home, the construction of your home. So you have wood, which comes from forests, also metals that come from mining, and plastics, and materials that come from oil and petroleum. So all resources on Earth come from Earth. So that's called natural capitalism. All life on Earth is based on nature and what nature and the Earth give us. So when we're building a house, the average home, I read this US GBC study 20 years ago, so it's not exactly probably the same as it is today, but they said for the average home, which back then was around, I think, 15,000 or 1,500 square feet, I think the average home was 3 acres of forest.
Wow.
So if you're just getting your lumber from a regular company, regular corporation that does clear cutting, and you think about the millions of homes and millions of businesses and schools and other buildings that are on Earth that are so much bigger than that, that's millions of acres of trees that we're cutting down. If you purchase from a selective forest company, there's one called FSC, the Forest Stewardship Council, which unfortunately today does not practice. I'm pretty sure they don't practice as environmentally friendly as they used to. But if you purchased back then wood from them, they utilized selective cutting, so they weren't cutting down the forest and destroying ecosystems. So that's one way to procure just even that one single simple product in building. But you can also go to a reuse building company where they've deconstructed buildings and they are reselling wood or plastics or windows. So then you're upcycling the products. So when we consume, what we're consuming are resources. And then when do we start consumption as humans?
I don't understand the question. Sorry.
So when do people start consuming products as a human? When do we start consuming?
From birth. I mean, from the day you're born, pretty much.
So are you sure it's the day you're born?
Oh, actually, the day that you're, I guess, like, what's the correct word? Like, I mean, the second the baby starts forming, the second the baby's impregnated, or probably even before that, because you're taking, whatever's in the mother is ultimately going into the child. So when she's pregnant, so probably from conception.
So those are all great. Vem. Yeah. So some people don't think that deeply. So if you're planning on having a family, that might be a little bit different than someone who has like a whoopsie baby. But say you want to have a family and you're talking to your spouse and you say, hey, let's have a baby. They say, okay. So we're going to have a baby. So we're going to go out and buy a little pregnancy stick. So you fool around and you pee on the stick. That's the first purchase as a human being.
Wow.
That's made.
Wow.
So you pee on a stick, and then so mom then is gonna say it's positive. Then the invitations go out. You get a bunch of invitations, or you get on the internet and you say, hey, we're pregnant, here we are, yay, that's wonderful. And right off the bat you hit the ground running and consumerism starts. So mom is probably going to start eating differently. She's going to take trips to the hospital. She's going to you guys are going to find a room in the house. You're going to paint the room, buy some cribs, buy a bunch of diapers, 10,000 diapers a year, something like that. And and then all the clothes for the baby, a bunch of toys for the baby. The holidays are, human Americans love holidays, and they love having, baby parties. So they start purchasing all kinds of products for the baby that's not even here yet. Mm-hmm. Sheets and toys and babies, strollers and seats for the car. So by the time a baby is born today, upwards sometimes of tens of thousands of dollars or more have already been spent purchasing conventional products like conventional paints and conventional bedding. That's a bunch of toxins, and baby shower stuff usually has a lot of plastics and toxins and all of the food that you're eating and all these other things. So for each person, every person that's born into the planet, before they're even born, they're consumers. And then you purchase stuff throughout your whole life. And then do you purchase after you're dead? Or are you still a consumer after you're dead?
I mean, coffins, I guess, would be, yes, part of it.
Yes. No, absolutely. So if you're embalmed, you go to the embalmer, and that's product that's being put in your body, and then you're getting your body painted, and if it's a show, so you have your coffin, and so we do this for decades. We're consuming, and then we're put in the ground or sprinkled onto the ground, depending on what we are. And there's not, I'm people want to be buried or these things different ways, but every person throughout their life, in the early 2000s, I think around 2007 or 8, back then, and this is before everyone had a bunch of different devices like computers, and before everybody was constantly going to coffee shops and eating. People were eating fast food back then, but the waste stream alone from products, and I'm not talking about the pollution from our vehicles or the energy use of our homes and fridges and all that stuff, but the waste alone was 4.5 pounds of garbage per day per person. And that worked out for a family of 4. If the whole family lived to be at least 75 years old, the waste stream was around 250,000 pounds of waste just in basic products. And that didn't include holiday products like wrapping paper and all of these other things. So we do have massive impacts on the planet. We're just not taught about these things. So teaching children and adults, especially adults, about consumerism and the impact that we have, and the value of buying green or eco-friendly and human-friendly products is very, very important. And I had done that for years, almost 20 years before I started Be Heroic. And it's an important thing because children really do care about the planet, but it really is up to adults. We don't have another generation. What we see today is the last generation. Most kids, based on what's happening with the environment, the massive collapse of ecosystems and food systems right now, most children won't live to be their parents' age. Most, 10 years old and under, they're not going to live to be their parents' age. But there are people that are, and I mean a tiny number of people that are doing everything they can to ensure that their children have an opportunity. So they're working on safe food systems, protecting themselves from 5G and from the vaccines and all the other toxic stuff. But if we don't, if we really don't stop these big, dangerous, the big triple threats, the Geo-Engineering, 5G, IoT, nobody will make it. So why do people consume? Why do we consume the way we do?
Mm-hmm. This is something that we're taught, that consumerism is part of our life from the day that we are born, and it's just something that we fall into, probably.
Yeah, so that's right. Advertise. So So we purchase out of habit, and so we purchase also because sometimes we need something, so we buy it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then other times we're told we need to buy something.
Mm-hmm.
And so buying things because you need them, buying because you're told you need them, you're told that you need them, and other times it's simply buying because you just want to have it, not that you need it or you're told to buy it. So really thinking about purchases is very important in that whole realm of purchasing. And advertisers, they run media, so they're never going to tell you the whole truth about any product. And if they do, it's always flowered over. One of the biggest things that you'll see and I think you and I had discussed this earlier, is in the pharmaceutical commercials. They show people on swings. They're talking about allergy medicine, and then the side effects are like anal bleeding and death. And people are just swinging on the swing, so people are like, oh, I'll take that. And then how does it impact the planet? We just gave a couple examples of that. So conscious consumerism. And this is, I think, it's the final consumerism slide. Conscious consumerism is really just being very aware of your product. And the word sustainable is thrown around. It's a huge greenwash term now, but in its truest sense, it means using a product or a resource at a rate where the foundation of that product and the resource itself can be replenished as quickly and efficiently as you are using the product itself.
Mm-hmm.
So that is what sustainable means. It means keeping the original value and the original essence in place while you're using whatever the resource is. And a real organic product, agrochemicals stole the term natural, and this should actually be, I think it should be in the other order. Natural means from nature, and everything on earth is from nature because we live here. Oil is from nature.
Mm-hmm.
But you can still call genetically engineered foods natural. You just can't call organic foods natural in labeling. So organic has to be, organic standards, depending on what they are, should be free of pesticides and fungicides and herbicides and inorganic fertilizers, and should have water. Even the water used on crops or in livestock, all of that stuff should be regularly tested. Mm-hmm. And one of the problems with the non-GMO labeling, the labeling of non-GMO, is people don't realize that those foods or products can still contain extremely high levels of pesticides and fungicides and herbicides. Everything from neonicotinoids to glyphosate, which is Roundup, mm-hmm. and they under the Trump administration, early in the pandemic, when everyone was locked down and paying attention to media, his administration had stopped restrictions on food additives. So a bunch of extra nano and biomaterial was added to mainstream foods during that time. And I don't think it's been changed back under the Biden administration either. Wow. So the conventional foods are even way more toxic now than they were pre-pandemic. Mm. And purchasing locally, especially if you know the farmers and ranchers, and you need to be very thoughtful about the questions that you ask them, and thoughtful of how educated they are on certain issues. Mm-hmm. If you're going to purchase especially meats today, you have to be very careful and make sure that they're They're like grass-fed beef, for example. Bayer has done massive campaigns on a Roundup-ready grass for ranchers that doesn't have any weeds in it. And these ranchers have no idea that glyphosate has huge impacts on the gut microbiome and the Shikimate pathway in humans and livestock. But ruminators, like cows, they have 4-chambered stomachs, and so it's going to impact their gut microbiome. So grass-fed, if it's grass-fed, you need to even ask, what are they grazing on?
Mm-hmm.
And what are the chemicals and things like that. And then fair trade, truly fairly traded products. There are several fair trade labelings, and you can look into these very, very simply. Some products can be fair trade and organically labeled or locally labeled, but fair trade is not always labeled as fair trade. The same way that organic, some people just don't want to purchase it costs a lot to be certified organic. So you can still have organic foods and meats that aren't certified organic that are actually better sometimes than certified.
Mm-hmm.
And then we talked about this a little bit before the show, but there are things you can do every day that are very helpful with the environment. Everybody uses the restroom every day. Pretty much everybody, I think, goes to the bathroom every day. And just by simply using recycled toilet paper, if everybody switched over, the U.S. would save anywhere from I think it's 60,000 to 100,000 trees or something like that every single day, just by switching to recycled toilet paper. And for those of you,
by the way, for toilet paper, you can make it out of hemp, right? So it's much more like renewable, better for the environment. Doesn't take 100 years to grow hemp.
Yeah, well, yeah. So hemp is not. Yeah, so trees, a tree is in a forest, anywhere from a couple of years to hundreds of years old. So if you're cutting down an old growth forest to wipe your ass, that's pretty stupid. But hemp, you can get, I think, 2 to 3 rotations of crops every year. And yeah, so using hemp paper is wonderful. And recycled toilet paper, by the way, is not recycled toilet paper. It's recycled paper that's made into toilet paper.
Yeah.
Have to clarify. Had a group of women in Tahoe I presented to a couple of years ago, and they said, "Oh, we thought it was toilet paper from the sewer plant that they." I was like, "What?" That's disgusting. So yes, hemp is wonderful, and for clothing, by the way, I got a Tahoe Hemp Company T-shirt on right now. Nice. Hemp is a wonderful material. Cotton is not only mostly GMO today, which is terrible for the environment, and they also use a tremendous amount of glyphosate and pesticides and things like that on cotton. But hemp material, hemp fibers, and hemp textiles have become just really wonderful. They're very soft and comfortable. You can get a thick weave or a light weave. You can do silk blends with them. I'm not a huge fan of the way silk is produced, but hemp is wonderful. It's also antibacterial. It's being made into everything today, from shirts and dresses to Enviro Textiles is a company out of Colorado. A wonderful woman-owned company out of Colorado, and they do all kinds of textiles, and have even started working with hospitals because of the antibacterial properties. So they make the gowns and hats and masks where you're actually supposed to use them in surgery, not driving in the car.
Mm-hmm.
All of it's from him.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Next one.
Sure. So this is the triple threat. This is the kind of the foundation of destruction, that the the reset is built upon. Agrochemical companies are chemical companies that have gotten into agriculture, and agrochemical and chemical and pharmaceutical are also all partnered with each other. When you look at one of these companies and you kind of dig into them, you'll see crossovers of companies and partnerships and board members, things like that. So in sickening, in creating a sick society with food, they started on this years and years ago, and with food and products, and the partnerships that we discussed earlier. One of the examples is the Pfizer Monsanto. So Monsanto grows chemical intensive, nutrient deficient, toxic foods that are genetically modified. There's studies all over the place. You can go to OCA, the Organic Consumers Association, or gmwatch.org, which has great information on all of these things that we're just going to do a quick introduction of right now. But so when you produce food with chemicals, chemical fertilizers and pesticides and fungicides, and you genetically modify them, when they're consumed by people, they go through our bodies, and our body a lot of times either doesn't recognize the material, or as it goes through our body, we digest it, and then it goes through our bloodstream, and then it goes to our kidneys and our liver, and it's constantly being filtered out. So when you eat foods that are loaded with pesticides and fungicides and toxins, your body, it has to constantly filter it out. So you end up getting sick. And if you eat foods that are genetically engineered, that gets into your glyphosate, for example. In glyphosate is Roundup, and Terry Vrain is a scientist who used to work for Monsanto, and he has all these great presentations on glyphosate and how they impact our physiology, and they impact your gut microbiome, the bacteria in your gut, and that there's a pathway that runs from your gut to your brain called the shikimate. I always mispronounce it, but you can Google it. The shikimate pathway goes from your brain to your gut. So this toxin impacts brain function, but it also impacts gut function. And glyphosate was originally a chemical that was used as an industrial pipe cleaner in the late 60s, I think, early 70s, something like that. Yeah. So they would take this chemical and put it in these huge industrial pipes, and then they dump it out into these big fields so that the pipes would descale to get the grime out of pipes. And they found that when it was dumped into fields, it would kill all the plants. So Monsanto purchased that chemical and modified it a bit and repatented it as glyphosate or Roundup. And so they spray it on fields and things like that. But the way that it works in fields is it works as an antimicrobial. And so when it gets into your gut, it impacts your gut that way. So if you're eating Roundup Ready wheat or wheat products that are sprayed, you're going to have an upset stomach, and your digestive system will be impacted, as well as in some cases your brain. So glyphosate is really, really bad for us in a lot of ways. Also has impacts on the brain, and with young children whose parents have been eating this toxin for a long time, along with other things, they're more likely to get to be autistic as well. And if you change their diet to organic and you clean them up and they do heavy metal detoxes and then chemical detoxes, you can help heal them more quickly from those anyway. Sorry, go ahead.
No, no, I was acknowledging. I was thinking.
So Dr. Mercola has a great study on that, and one of the best studies on the autism parallel, and some of the information from Terry Rain is also on Jeffrey Smith's website called Institute for Responsible Technology. Fantastic website. And Jeffrey Smith also wrote Seeds of Deception, and was one of the original leaders in exposing the GMO technologies. So you eat these toxic foods, and then you end up with problems like autism. You end up with problems with obesity because you're eating this toxic food that's low in nutrients, and your body's not getting those nutrients because it's busy trying to protect itself from these toxins which build up in your gut and your liver and your brain. And on the back end of that, you end up having problems, obesity, diabetes, cancer, and these are all demonstrated in documents in National Institute of Health. And again, you can go back to the earlier websites mentioned that have many studies, thousands of studies on this. But if you eat this toxic food, it's very cheap. So if you go to fast food joints and you're eating this very cheap food and you eat it for your whole life, these companies know they're still going to get their money back, even if they're giving away the food. It's way cheaper to buy a 2-liter bottle of Coca-Cola than it is a 2-liter bottle of spring water, and there's a reason for that. They want you to take in this very toxic food, and then on the back end with pharmaceutical, they make billions and billions of dollars.
Wow.
So when people don't feel good, they don't function, they don't want to learn, they don't want to think, and they're also busy trying to heal themselves. So the breakdown of society through food is just one way that they've helped set up the reset, set up the Great Reset. And when you add after the first false flag event we had, 9/11, after that, people started getting more into cell phones, and purchasing had picked up again. When people got back into technology and they really started getting on their phones and social media, that helped the telecom industry get people's attention away from what was the last false flag, that big fear mongering that they had. And people stopped really looking around. Now they're looking down at their phones all the time. So they're not looking at the environment. So they could really start doing a lot more of the aerosol geoengineering. So aerosol geoengineering in the US really took off after 2001 because they had all the planes on the ground. They could retrofit a lot of the planes for the upcoming projects. And then they just kind of took off from there. So every year they're doing more and more and more aerosol geoengineering. And that's only one of the technologies. But in order to have sky to ground communications and clear communications back and forth with all the 5G towers so that you can have driverless vehicles and military drones, you have to have the entire atmosphere saturated with metallics, and you need to be able to control all of the moisture because moisture disrupts communications. So these technologies collectively are huge problems.
Yeah. We have this one slide remaining, the geoengineering lawsuit.
Yes. So for years, there have been wonderful groups in the front lines of exposing and stopping geoengineering. People like Ilana Freeland and Nick Begich and Dane Wigington and Gilles Diane and Jim Lee and others. Even over in Italy, there's a group called Tanker Enemy. And then there's some national groups. that are also working to, or international groups, excuse me, that are working to expose geoengineering, like Geo-Engineering Monitor and others. Certainly not all of them. The people that I mentioned all have wonderful groups, each in their own right, and they're all working in different areas. Dane Wigington from Geo-Engineering Watch is very public about his geoengineering lawsuit, but more recently, we are working with a wonderful group out of Nevada City, California. And there's a woman named Renette Senum who is a very powerful leader in the political realm. She's when I first met her, I told her, I said, "You're not a politician. You don't know how to lie." And she's not a bullshitter. She just gets stuff done. She's a wonderful political entity. She was twice the mayor of Nevada City, and she's not scared to talk about geoengineering or 5G or any other dangerous technologies. And she's heading up a lawsuit. And I had given you the link to the lawsuit, which maybe we can put in for.
Yeah, I'll share. Let me see if I can share the screen here.
So she is assembling a team right now to execute a lawsuit so that we can expose and stop geoengineering on a larger scale in a very positive and proactive manner. Oh, I think you have the NASA Worldview website up right now.
Yeah, that's a link I had here in my chat. Let me see.
Oh, I didn't give you the. Oh, I think I emailed you the other one.
Oh, is it the Give Send Go one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
No worries. It's a little slow in pulling up. Here we go.
There you go. So this is the Stop U.S. Geoengineering Legal Fund site. So with this fundraiser, we'll have our team. She already has a few attorneys, and we're working with her on the consulting end to get her together with different scientists and physicians that are going to be supporting entities in the lawsuit. So that should be getting going off the ground after we have the foundational money raised. So if you or anyone else are interested in giving to this project, that would be very helpful. That we need to stop geoengineering as soon as possible. We are in a tremendous bind right now with that technology.
Wow. We'll have that link on the bottom too for people that want to go to that Give Send Go account and help out. So primarily in terms of the viewers, the best thing to do is to go to that Give Send Go and donate. So there could be these actions against geoengineering.
Yes.
Very cool. Is there anything else the folks out there could do? I mean, having, if they watch episode 62 and also this episode, I mean, there's a lot of techniques on how to protect yourself, like the Spiro tablets. Is there anything else people could do in terms of action against this calamity that's happening with geoengineering?
Oh, so yes. So our lawsuit is not is not the same lawsuit that Dane Wigington from Geo-Engineering Watch is doing. And you can get on his website and read about what he's doing. There are state and federal laws for weather modification. And unfortunately, geoengineering is similar but not the same. So it doesn't have the same restrictions. And when aerosols are released over us, they're released because of different reasons. Sometimes it's a commercial project, sometimes it's military, sometimes it's a science foundation or an experiment. So if you want to, you can go to geoengineeringmonitor.org. They have a map of all the different projects, whether it's a solar radiation management geoengineering project or carbon dioxide removal, and you can actually write to the companies or organizations. You can also be proactive and show up at different geoengineering events and get on social media. And it's easy to search for geoengineering groups. You can put in the word geoengineering and your state, or geoengineering organizations, and in different social media outlets. But other groups, like Zero Geoengineering, for example, is working on state laws where if a project is being executed over the state, they need consent from the community. And I think there's only one state in the country that's doing it right now, but you can find out more information about it on their website. And then Jim Lee, who is the researcher and founder of Climate Viewer, had started rewriting the ENMOD, or Environmental Modification Treaty, which is the United Nations treaty. Unfortunately, he did not receive enough funding to keep that going. So he is looking for funders as well, and you can donate to him on his page as well. But speaking about this publicly is very important. If someone calls you a conspiracy theorist, it's because they are ignorant, and arrogance and ignorance go hand in hand. If they're too ignorant, they won't look up in the sky. If they're too ignorant to even take a look just for a few minutes to see that in aerosol geoengineering, it's very obvious that those trails are not natural. Even on the coldest day, you can't walk with your friend and talk and have a little cloud coming out of your mouth. If you walk down the street and around the corner, you don't have a big trail behind you, because moisture in the cold, it just dissipates. So these people just don't have any common sense. It's not common anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
And then for 5G, you can physically protect your body with Faraday materials, or you can get products like the Spiro Solutions discs that Ben had mentioned. You can get those on our website, or just go straight to Spiro Solutions.
This is an awesome presentation, Nikki. A lot of heavy stuff that people need to be very cognizant about, because, they're so busy out there, like you're saying, talking about nonsense, talking about pronouns, talking about literally garbage, waste of time topics, and they're killing the freaking planet in front of our eyes. All you need to do is look up at the sky, do a mild research. I mean, all it took was that, less than 2-hour episode that we did, Nikki. And I suddenly had the knowledge to know what a real cloud looks like and what a fake cloud looks like, what a geoengineered cloud looks like. So highly recommend that people watch these episodes and make this top of mind, because once the planet is gone, we're all gone. So that's my spiel. Is there anything that we didn't discuss, Nikki, that you want to mention in closing?
No, I just really want to thank you for letting us share this information.
Yeah, thank you. And, just in closing, to the viewers out there, AmericaHappens.com is the format, the platform that we're on. And without your support, we asked for money for this, money for that, you need money, and everybody needs money. But the reality is that the work that we're doing here, whether it's helping out Be Heroic, helping out these lawsuits against geoengineering, or helping out America Happens on a crowdfunding level to support us so we could bring you this content that, frankly, the mainstream media is not talking about. And it's too important. It's way too important for us not to know this information, because there's calamity facing us right in front of our nose right now, and not much is being done. So please support Nikki. Please support the lawsuits that Nikki's supporting, and please support AmericaHappens.com. You can go to our website, donate right then and there. Everybody talks about how the mainstream media is essentially lying to us, selling us pharmaceuticals that are bad to us, covering up the poisoning of our planet, covering up the destruction of our planet because they are funded by the people that are destroying the planet. Well, the solution is for us to crowdfund our own media. We, the people, fund our own media, and we will never censor on AmericaHappens.com. None of our shows will do that. We are the antithesis of the Mockingbird media, and all of our shows, whether it's this show, Blood Money, or Joey Gilbert's podcast, Gloves Off, whether it's Mindy Robinson's show, Conspiracy Truth, whether it's Gianna Michelli's show, The State National University, it's all about bringing truth to we the people so we could solve some of these very serious issues and really lead to a better America 2.0. So thank you very much for joining us, and I will see you on the next episode of Blood Money.